Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here very much as the intruder, and at the same time, I'm particularly happy to be here because it gives me a chance to say some things about people who very much deserve that they should be said. Since we've just been listening to David Torrance, it's only fair that I should say that he is a most astonishingly fair person. It's a very remarkable thing that in what has necessarily been a long and frequently embittered series of controversies wandering in and out of Scottish independence, but with a whole series of peripheral associations and so on, that in fact there has been an enormous amount of journalism masquerading as objective, which is in fact deeply committed. In the introduction to this little book, the phrase occurs, "Academics abhor bias," which gave me a great laugh because I'm a historian. It's my job to work on bias in every possible way. I would as much abhor bias as I would abhor my breakfast. Occasionally, of course, you do find yourself wanting to abhor a breakfast, and there are some works of history which come into that category. But in general, there are bound to be biases, and in fact, history, insofar as we can never produce good history, and we never really will, is judging, working out, assessing the biases themselves, and so forth. Now, what's very unusual about David Torrance is that while he's on the record as saying that his father was a sympathiser, or just still is, with Scottish nationalism, and that he himself has sympathies with the Tory party, in fact, with this frankness, he writes from a very cool, careful perspective, and while you might find that bias, or at least preference, was creeping in here and there, in fact, in general, you see a thoroughly genuine person, a very hard-working journalist, who has produced a tremendous amount of fascinating material based on God knows how many interviews, and I only hope that he and the University of Dundee will ensure that these invaluable records, which he has accumulated by his own very hard work, will be deposited for the benefit of future generations. Because, of course, in saying that I'm a historian, I'm thinking of my dear and alas, late friend, Professor Jim McMillan, who, when asked about the future, would always reply, "I'm a historian, my field is the past." And this very much applies to me too. And at the same time, in looking at what is going to happen, journalists in so many instances, having forgotten their duty, is to write about the past. And in fact, almost every paper you can pick up is more concerned with what they think is going to be happening tomorrow than with what has in fact happened yesterday, which is what you really want to know about. Now, David Torrance is somebody who has worked with the past, and for somebody writing and frankly admitting preferences, he has done an incredibly valuable job, and historians in years to come, as well as the public at the present time, will be deeply grateful to him, and will have every reason for being so. His narratives are engaging, absorbing, thorough, fascinating, and through it all you see somebody who is so anxious to do the right thing and the fair thing. Thank God we have him. So he has played his part, as I've been telling you in the making of this book. Jamie Maxwell, the co-editor, co-author, also, and obviously they have worked with tremendous success as a team. Now, I come into this because I was a very close friend, dear friend, of Stephen Maxwell, who was the press officer for the SNP and former tutor in politics in Edinburgh University, and worked in the voluntary sector for most of his life. He was a most remarkable man, a man of extraordinary charity, genuineness, high principle, but an utter absence of malice of any kind. As a press officer for the SNP, he was about the most remarkable that I have ever seen or heard. If somebody wrote, asked, delivered a hostile question, Stephen was perfectly capable of saying, oh, now, if you'll allow me to say so, I don't think that's actually a very good way to attack the SNP. A more fruitful way of attacking it might be X or Y. And so the press suddenly found themselves, to their horror, being educated. It is understandable, therefore, that the leading intellect, on whatever position, who got involved in questions of Scotland, should have gravitated to Stephen whether they agreed or totally disagreed with him. Now, he produced various other books, but he was working on this book, which was splendidly published, a great deal of hard work involved in the publication, by Lua, arguing for independence. It came out 2 years ago. I'm never likely to forget it, because I had been reading the text for Stephen and handed it back to him in the National Library with my corrections and so forth, and suggested amendments, and he said thanks, he was looking forward to going over it, and I said I'd see you in a month's time, and he grinned and went through the National Library, and I never saw him again. He was dead by the time the month came out. He was in fact dying of cancer, which he knew perfectly well, but he was not telling. His concern always was with other people, including his country, including the world. He never wanted a narrow nationalism. He wanted a good, strong, left-wing nationalism which would be concerned with the entire country and the world as far as he was concerned. It wasn't the arguments saying that if you're concerned with Scottish self-government, you lose your due concern with the rest of the island. As far as he was concerned with the rest of the world and thought that this was what our obligation was to be. Now, he died. I had never met Jamie before until the funeral, and then the two of us realised that we had to do what we could do to get the book out, and thanks be to God, because of Gavin McDougall's and his team's splendid work and tremendous sympathy in very tragic circumstances, the book appeared, and I think has been very successful. I hope it has, and certainly it will be extraordinarily informative. But as I say, Jamie got his first blood in this business in these appalling circumstances. And he subsequently went on to produce a very good collection of essays by his father. Jamie worked over the various collections of magazines and compilations and so forth, to which Stephen Maxwell had contributed so well in such informative and dedicated ways. And as I say, that book, The Case for Left-Wing Nationalism, Jamie brought out, again, Gavin, and he and I have been working together on a book on independence called Why Not, which will be coming out, I take it, in early August. Not the last word, except in point of time. But it has been a tremendously thrilling business for me to be working with Jamie. Very much the future. And David Torrance gave a very nice opposition for us in saying about his father's memories of the referendum of 1979, which so few people remember was actually won by the cause of having an assembly, but cheated at that because of the attachment to the referendum of 40%. The thing about it was the UK, despite all of the anxieties of people like David Cameron and Alistair Darling trying to explain to you that the United Kingdom was the greatest thing that God ever did, if God exists, that the United Kingdom, like any other regime, has its little problems, and it didn't actually understand how to do referendums very well. It had a referendum in the 1970s, you may recall, that we shall have gone into the European Union 2 years ago. That was the referendum. I mean, you realise that in one way it's a great tribute to the country which had produced Alice Through the Looking Glass. But it's hardly surprising that the UK has had so much difficulty within the European Union because of this basis upon which it got there. And again, the referendum of '79 was one in which most referendums in most countries exist with decisions being taken on the basis of them, not here. So there was that extremely sour feeling, not made any better by the fact that Sir Alec Douglas-Hume, in the run-up to the 1979 referendum, had said that if the Scots voted no to that they would get a much better deal from the Tories. Whereas in fact what they got from the Tories was so much alienation from Margaret Thatcher that she can, in wherever she is now, claim to be the mother of Scottish devolution, because of course the extraordinary vote which came thundering in, something like 73% of voters in favour of independence when we finally had that referendum at the end of the 90s. And now, moving to where we are and seeing what we want to do, of course, the most important thing of all that we're concerned with is, yes, you will get various questions here. Yes, a great many of the questions, even the 5 million questions, are quite unanswerable. An enormous number of the things that have been said in this debate are about, or have received completely nonsensical answers on both sides. Like the press, people have gone in for fortune-telling. This book has the tremendous merit that it really is keeping you very much on what is known. And as I say, we know very little. Personally, I think if there is a yes vote, you see, we can't even be certain what parties will be in power. And a tremendous amount of the argument that's been going on the basis of I don't like your party, I don't like your party, you'll be wrong when you do X, you'll be wrong when you do Y. But we've no reason to believe how these things are there. Give you a very obvious, if repulsive example. Mr. Philip Hammond had been explaining to us at great length how whatever happened, Trident would be there forever and ever and ever. And of course now he isn't even there himself. And he is there as an object for us to bear in mind of human mortality. The one thing in actual fact I do think is definite in the future is that if there is a yes vote, there won't be Trident. That's not simply on the basis of what anybody's promised. It was that if no new state will be allowed, can be allowed to have weapons of mass destruction. An enormous war was fought in Iraq on that very principle. Illegal, but it was fought. So no country coming into a new existence could have these things. Therefore it'll be illegal, and anybody who tries to keep them going will be guilty, presumably, of conspiracy to abort the ends of justice. Well, that's the one point where I think there is a certainty. And even there, of course, we mightn't have a future. One of their nasty little machines might go off and kill the lot of us. But what I think we should do is try to go in as well informed as we can, asking questions and seeking the answers. And what this book does so very cleverly is that it gives you a whole series of different persons giving their various ideas. I was delighted to find on the question of weapons of mass destruction that it's Baroness Worsey whom they have selected to give the appropriate statement. And I had this wonderful vision, despite the fact that David Cameron is always talking about the wonderful history of the UK and all the battles it won and so on, that I had this vision of David Cameron and George Osborne and Philip Hammond, of course, trembling at the knees as they stand behind Baroness Worsey as she bravely gives the statement on their behalf. So here she is giving it, and then there's an opposing statement to that, and there isn't so many other cases. It's beautifully set out from that point of view, and the orchestra is managed very, very well by our two editors. And it does mean that this book at least can claim that you are hearing both sides, and you are hearing both sides at their most useful, which is very unusual. So I think we've every reason to be very grateful to them, particularly every reason to be grateful to Gavin MacDougall and to the team at Lua. And I know you will join with me, and David Torrance will particularly join with me, in sending our love to Jamie Maxwell and his family, and hoping to God that everything will go well with them. But in the meantime, let me congratulate you, David, and wish you every success.